BetStamp wants to ensure you've maximized your ROI. Line shopping for the best odds matters, and that is why any profitable sports bettor needs to be using multiple sports books. Thankfully, there has never been a better time to get signed up, and they are here to connect you with the best promotions industry-wide. Using their link, signupexpert.com-TAS, you can get access to all the sportsbooks in your region, along with a review of each platform and its unique features. Most importantly, this page automatically connects you to the top promotions at each book, allowing you to start line shopping with an enhanced.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Drew with High Fight IQ, and you are now watching the MMA Conspiracy Hour with my boys Todd Adkins and Miguel Iturrate. Miguel has been the matchmaker for over 200 shows worldwide and has worked with Hook and Shoot, Euphoria, Bodog, and ADCC. Make sure you subscribe to the Todd Atkins Show on YouTube. You can also find Miguel on his YouTube channel at MMA Collector 74. Don't forget to subscribe to High Fight IQ on all social media platforms. The House Call Sports on YouTube, the Fight Pit on YouTube. Now let's talk some fights, baby. Let's go.
All right, this is Todd Atkins, and I'm here back with Miguel Iturrate. We're going to do a little MMA conspiracy hour today, and we're going to respond to a video that someone had sent me from MMA On Point, where they kind of covered the Mark Hunt kind of lawsuit that he has with the UFC, and also TKO's. They had some leaked emails saying that at some point the subject of replacing Dana White came up in those emails. So we're going to kind of respond to these two topics. And as always, I want to thank our sponsors, Live to Fight and BetStamp. And Miguel, I kind of want to let you start with your opening salvo that you're so known for on this topic.
Oh boy. Well, kudos to MMA Point. They're not afraid of the UFC and their machine by bringing some of the news in this video to light. Mark Hunt has been pretty vocal the last few months, last few years, over his dislike for Dana, and the lawsuit here is just another step of that. People who followed the business, and I remember when the fight with Lesnar happened, everybody knew pretty much that Lesnar was on steroids, and that they were bringing him along, and that they wanted him to be a face of the company, and that their biggest pay-per-views were always Brock Lesnar's at that point. The situation is that I believe that the news was out there that, Lesnar was positive for steroids after the fight, and that there may have been a positive test before the fight. And if that was the case, obviously the fight needed to be canceled, and it wasn't canceled, it was pushed through. Now, in Hunt's very real situation, you're talking about heavyweights and, prime athletes at the top of their game. It really literally is taking his life in his hands. If steroids are, considered to increase Lesnar's aggressiveness and strength and recoverability and stuff like that, sending in a roided Lesnar, which is illegal to take steroids, to a fight is the same as, tantamount to Antonio Margarito wrapping his hands with cement against Miguel Cotto. It's something, Mike Tyson is a guy that you got to respect when he's talking about at this level. In combat sports, steroids become very dangerous. If you're a hockey player or a football player, they make you stronger, faster, and things like that. They're also dangerous, but they're not as dangerous in combat sports where you're literally putting your life at risk to a certain extent. The contract for the UFC I would be shocked if they took it out, but for many, many years, and probably still has a clause somewhere in there that says that the athlete understands he is putting his life at risk when he enters this, because this is an extreme and combat sport. So to aggravate that, Mark Hunt has a point. Mark Hunt has a philosophical point where he's right. They were playing with his life. And that's one of the reasons why he doesn't take very well to, the whole situation. Now, whether he has any strength in court or not is a different story. Like I said, if Dana can be proven that they knew Lesnar was on steroids, then they were faced with the situation that they should have canceled that fight, and they did not. Now, obviously, we know they're a money-making machine, so that's the reason they did it. It's because they were going to make money, and they didn't want to lose money. It also brings to mind one of the things that we were talking about offline earlier this week, which is the upcoming Conor McGregor fight. What could happen with Conor? They've already sold 20 million in tickets, right? So what does that mean? That means that if Conor is positive in steroids, they're also going to try to railroad the fight through because the money's there already. Because the right thing to do is to cancel the fights. Nobody's above the law. Not Lesnar back then, not Conor now. But they've already shown willingness to skirt over some of the rules when it comes down to the almighty dollar. That's Mark Hunt's point. Can he prove it in court to the point where they're going to take action against him? I think that could be difficult. There's emails and things like that. There may be a good enough paper trail that shows this. If he can prove that the UFC was aware Lesnar was positive for steroids before the fight and that they took action or inaction to not cancel the fight, then he may have a leg to stand on. But I'm not sure, Mark Hunt has had a very successful career, K1, MMA. He's also got an ethnic and an iconic status in Asia and Australasia, in that area there, where he might have a very strong financial backer, paying legal fees and things and throwing the book at the UFC. That would make the lawsuit more dangerous. But a lot of the times, especially in American courts, the lawsuits and legal things basically come down to a game of attrition as the more rich party drags the process out as much as possible. And we're 10 years from the fight, right? How long has it been? So they've been dragging it out, and that exhausts the reserves and the resolve of the people soon. Now, Mark Hunt, to his credit, I don't think his resolve has been wasted. I think he's been even more aggravated because of, possibly being delayed and possibly not getting his time to tell his story and to actually get activity here. But again, does he have a backer who can face down Dana, who's reportedly worth $500 million? I'm sure that there are lawyers, multiple lawyers, that are employed by Dana full time. He's got a lawyer for this, I've heard Dana hire somebody to do his shopping. So when he needs new clothes, underwear, socks, and stuff, someone goes and buys it for him because he doesn't have the time to deal with that. So if somebody's just doing his basic shopping, he almost certainly has lawyers out there that are going to be looking to protect things. Hey, they found a lawyer, and some of them will be UFC lawyers. But some may actually be Dana lawyers protecting Dana's interests, such as maybe in the slot fighting or, maybe in, at the end of the day, at some point he has Dana White's Contender Series, which, bears his name and stuff like that. You don't want to find out somebody's bootlegging Dana White Contender Series shirts. You want to have a lawyer ready to sue those people. You know what I mean? And so I think once you become a big entity, I think Mark Hunt is the smaller of the two in this lawsuit. And I think that always plays a factor in this type of lawsuit. So we'll see. He could be right in where he stands in his case. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to win.
Let me ask you this. I mean, before we kind of continue on this, before Endeavor came in, UFC wasn't nearly as buttoned up as it probably needed to be. You know what I mean? Especially when Dana and the Fertitas and all them first started getting into it, and long after that, even. It was kind of, I wouldn't
Well,
say
we all know
ragtag, but they didn't cover themselves very well on a lot of fronts.
well, we all
So,
know here's the situation. We all know more or less the arc of the story. When they bought the company, they were able to claim, "Hey, we're 40 million in the hole, but we love the sport. We're not going away." And then, more or less, though they chopped people like journalists and homemade companies and T-shirt companies and small sponsors and stuff, though they chopped those people's legs off, they could probably claim a pretty high percentage of fighters that they quote unquote took care of. And I mean, and you don't understand. I have some experience with this. I can point out to fighters that made millions of dollars in the future, and they've all thanked me for a moment where I took their careers and they were making 2-2 for a fight, and I said I'm going to give them a 4-fight deal for 100,000, 25 flat a fight in 18 months. It means you're going to make about 70 grand a year. Now you're middle class, but you can work at this. You don't need to do something else. When you're making 2-2 for every fight, you can't just count on that income. That was life changing for them, and those people still thank me over it. They remember it. And Dana White was able to duplicate that, I don't know, 100-fold times, 1,000-fold times, not with money, but with the quantity of people that they were able to affect because of the size of their roster and stuff. So every fighter, Chuck Liddell, you think Chuck didn't appreciate the first time they gave him $1 million? I've heard rumors that Matt Hughes was given a $5 million bonus. Not rumors, Monty Cox told me, and that was on his manager. And Matt Hughes was told by Dana to cut Monty because Monty would be entitled to a percentage of that according to their handshake agreement. And at some point, you do got to figure, was Monty, if he's getting 20% of $5 million, that's $1 million, was for something he didn't negotiate, didn't work on, didn't move. Is Monty right or is Matt Hughes right? It doesn't matter. Dana looks good, and what we now feel is the case is that if they were giving out a $5 million bonus, that they were pocketing 50. And that's not the way anybody, would envision the sport dividing the money up. But again, when the bonuses started and they go, we're going to $25,000 bonuses. The first bonus that I could track down, I believe Sam Stout, the Canadian fighter, said he got an envelope with a handwritten check and a thank you note from Dana for $500 as a bonus. And that was one of the first bonuses that the UFC under Dana gave. Then that escalated to now they're roughly 75,000. They give out 4 or 5 bonuses per show, so they're banking $300,000 just in bonuses on top of the salaries afterwards. So how much are they really making that they're pocketing on that? Again, Dana's the richest person in this sport, not any of the athletes. There are owners in the NBA and stuff that are very, very wealthy, but a lot of those people aren't NBA owners because they were poor before. LeBron makes billions of dollars, and players even of other generations like Magic Johnson's worth billions, Michael Jordan's worth in the $1 billion range and stuff like that. The money in other sports is divided differently than in this sport. Again, even recently, you saw the example at UFC 300. There was, and maybe this was a little bit orchestrated to make them look good, but again, just do the math. If they're giving out $75,000 bonuses, and as a special marker for the UFC 300, they up the bonuses to 300,000. In other words, 4 times. How much money are they making? So that's the big question there is, and the big thing there is that the UFC was always unaccountable for how much are they actually making. So when they were spreading the money out around the fighters, they were able to buddy and maintain their reputation. Like, man, he gave me a bonus, I didn't fight and they gave me my show and win money. How many of those types of stories came out in the early days? And how many didn't come out but actually happened? Because Dana, at the same time, Dana's no dummy. It's not like Dana was always just banking money. They would use this as a tool to maintain the roster happy. And you don't have to maintain 100% people happy on the roster, but they probably hit a pretty high percentage. So that's why they were unaccountable. You need a lawyer with access to the emails and the actual finances of the company to really find out what it is they were doing. And that's a hard story. At the end of the day, the UFC lawsuit where the fighters presented 1,000 fighters in a class action and stuff like that, they decided to take the money rather than actually work against the UFC. We're going to see, we got to be coming up on that 60-day period where some of the gag orders and stuff are up. We're probably within a couple of weeks of that. We're going to see if anything else comes of that.
Bob told me it was May 24th, actually.
May 24th. So we're a week away. We're 10 days away. So,
but what I was getting at is, let's say you're TKO and you take on my UFC. This is the second lawsuit you've had to deal with since you took me on. Should they have some concern that, we took on these guys, they weren't really all that buttoned up with the way they ran things for, the first probably, I don't know how many years. What else is out there that's going to bite us in the ass?
Yeah. They have to be wondering about what liabilities they missed, if they, if any. They were, again, Endeavor, when they came, they were bigger than the Fertittas, who were billionaires, Yep. So it was like a corporate entity coming in to buy them. So they have plenty of $500 an hour lawyers. Somebody should get fired if they didn't figure out that there was some volatility to what Dana White and these people were doing. That there was some question that they were completely not going to be held accountable, or at least nobody could question their business acumen, that they were fair on all accounts, that they were not just a money-making machine that would double cross people or actually act, in a manner that looks like a monopoly and things like that, then, and that's on Endeavor. And the other part of it is this is in the MMA point piece said Endeavor might be, looking to replace Dana. That's fine. I'm like I mentioned to you, I'm sure Top Rank has a contingency plan to replace Bob Arum at some point. You know what I mean? It's like you have to have some type of plan there. But if you look back at the inception of it, now, what is Joe Rogan in the UFC? Joe's a major influencer, so it's hard to measure his real value and his real position there. But at the end of the day, he is just a fucking announcer, right? The commentator, right? So how does his contract for the transition with Endeavor? So they're no longer going to be the Fertittas where he's friends with them and, they train together and they do this kind of stuff. And now they're going to be Endeavor. So Joe says, okay, let's sit down with lawyers and we'll get a contract. And, Joe has enough money to get himself there. And his contract says that if Dana goes, I go. Right? That's public information. He both said it. I'm sure Joe's on the record saying that.
Yeah.
So if Joe Rogan, a TV commentator, has a contract, what do you think Dana White had?
Yeah.
Dana White had a very protected entry into Endeavor, where he was going to get carte blanche to do whatever he wanted under the UFC banner on the fight end. He was going to be whatever they wanted to label the department. Talent relations, anything to do with talent or talent relations or fighting or in-the-ring action or anything like that had to go through Dana. There may have been a time cap on that. Endeavor may not have liked signing it, but the Fertittas may have said, hey, if you don't sign it, we're not giving you the company. And again, even with a time limit and things like that, or the Endeavor would have had to work some exceptions in there. Some of those exceptions might be, the responsibility of over time avoiding lawsuits and, some type of things like that, which could chip away, but from we talked about it offline. Dana White has had no lower moment than punching his wife in the face on camera on New Year's Eve. Why didn't they fire him then? And I presented to you back then that probably they couldn't.
Right.
And Dana's reaction to that, Dana's got a Teflon ability to survive and stuff like that. But Dana's attitude and everything seemed to hint at that. That they can't fire me. I can do that. I'm going to be able to do that, and I'll survive this. And I'll do what I can in the press to say, I'm sorry to my wife. It's a personal situation. It's my low moment and stuff like that. And he gave the talk, but you never saw the type of worry from him that his job was ever at risk. So they couldn't fire him then. What are the restrictions to get rid of him? Maybe they got down to the point where they said, look, if we start losing money under Dana, we got to be able to get rid of him. And Dana may very well at that point said, I've always made money. The Fertittas are leaving this game billionaires because of me, or, adding to their billions because of me. So I have a track record of making money. I'm okay with that. If we lose money, well, now you've lost $300 million. Your activities have lost the company $400 million or whatever the settlement was. So now there may be something there that they can look at. But again, I think Dana's got a situation where that original contract with the UFC being transferred to Endeavor gives him certain amounts of protection. That's why you've seen him act the way he has. Because when the Fertittas bought the UFC from Meyrowitz and they bought Dana along to be the guy, they had what can only be labeled as a special relationship. Dana didn't have to worry about, Dana, Lorenzo, they were friends. They were boys together, hanging out kind of thing. Birds of a feather.
Right.
That's not Dana's relationship with Rahm Emanuel, I don't think. Dana's a more mature man now, and obviously, like I said, he's got lawyers, he's got money. He knows how to handle himself around people like that. But I don't think they're spending Christmas Eve together. I also don't think, for example, again, they're older men, but it's an example. There's video of Dana and the Fertittas in a gym with Chuck and the fighters training and hanging out and stuff like that. Have you ever seen Rami Emanuel training like that? I've seen him with a belt, but not with that camaraderie. So he's not in the same situation as he was there with the UFC before. So who knows exactly how it plays itself out, but I still think it will be very hard for them to get rid of him.
The other thing that I was getting at, the Fertittas left, and had they stayed, they probably could have just been sitting on their ass collecting money. They wouldn't have had to really do anything. So for them to leave, to me, gives me the idea that maybe they thought it was a good time to get out and Dana didn't.
Very well. I have really no
because there might be some stuff coming down the pipe. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Look, the Mark Hunt situation. Mark Hunt probably has the Fertittas involved in the lawsuit as well because they were the owners back then. And they're the ones with big money also. So if he's asking for money, they would be a natural party to take some from. I don't know that for sure. I haven't seen the lawsuit at that level. Again, these are players of a different level. So to me, I think the Fertittas are looking at, we'll make $5 billion over the course of the next 10 years, or we'll get it all up front now and sell the company. And that way we've got $5 million on hand instead of having to collect it. And we can move something else. The older brother, Tillman, owns the Houston Rockets. So it's not like, and Tillman's a name you never heard associated with the UFC. So there you're in a situation where, again, you don't know what kind of, maybe they just bought real estate and have a bunch of houses and they live the lifestyle of leisure at this point or stuff like that, or maybe they're moving money in some other direction. The other thing that would be interesting is like, let's say that Endeavor were to be able to remove Dana from the UFC. Dana, like we've said, is already kind of an entity unto himself. He actually already has probably, I think rather easily, you look at people. What happened to Khabib's Eagle FC show? Not doing much of that anymore, is he? So yeah, people don't have, but Dana White easily has one of the top 5 most best known fight entities out there besides the UFC in Dana White's Contender Series. So what kind of non-compete clause is there? Was the or in the original days, Art Davies' non-compete clause actually expired, and there was the rumor that he was working with other forces to try to make another show to go against the UFC, and him and Bob Meyerowitz, had it out in their own ways and things like that, and Meyerowitz had to protect his interest, but that was small time stuff. But there was an expiration date, so Dana might have to sit for 2 years, and then Dana opens up a show immediately. The name recognition value and the resources he could bring would make the show very dangerous to the UFC. So, you have to value that in any type of firing of him, is if they can't control him from just opening up another show and doing it, because that would certainly affect their bottom line. Making Dana be the competitor in the head of a new show where we're going to do things, they can do whatever they want. It's like, hey, the Fertittas went out and bought cruise ships with their billions of dollars, and now we're going to do fights on cruises. Same TV production, stuff like that, but we're going to do less rules, a little more bare knuckle style, this, that, mix it up, change things differently. And Dana's an instant player taking money away from the UFC now. So just getting rid of him doesn't mean that Dana's going to, retire. That's the other part is nothing in Dana's personality makes me think that he would go away quietly, like be like, yeah, I'm just going to smoke cigars in Vegas and play my card games. And, every once in a while, take my wife to Cancun for vacation, put my kids through college and maybe open up a museum with the memorabilia I've collected. That's not, Dana's not going away quietly. So, yeah, if there's moves to get rid of him, they're going to have to be very elaborate moves, or they're going to have something very, very detailed in order to push him out. That he ran a monopoly could present that, but again, other than talk among us and people who know the business, that could say, yeah, it certainly looks like a monopoly at times, but unless there's a move in that direction, the settlement seemed to hint at that, right? They took the money, but here's the interesting part. Dana still has his checking account is identical to what it was before. The day before the settlement, the day after settlement, Dana parted with no money for that settlement. So he's just as rich and powerful as before. And you could literally argue they did nothing to him. Nothing. So would Endeavor have enough to say, yeah, and we're going to change business practices. So, that means that we're going to do revenue sharing with the fighters. People estimate that the UFC's revenue sharing with the fighters right now is in the 15 to 20% range, something like that. We're going to do like the NBA where the fighters are going to get 55%. And Rahm Emanuel's going to be okay with that. The corporation that came into this for the money is going to be okay with changing business practices and splitting the money more fairly with the fighters and making less themselves. It might not even be in their best interest, no matter what they've got on Dana, to get rid of him, because they're making as much money as they possibly can right now as is.
Now, let's discuss a little bit of Hunt's thing, because, obviously I discussed this a little bit with Bob, and he didn't seem to think, I don't know how much he's investigated it, but I think he felt like it really wasn't going to pan out or anything. But if it did, because I know there was some delay as far as the release of information that was going to come out as a result of this. It was supposed to come out May 8th, but I guess there's going to be, I think it's closer to the end of May. And what would it look like if it did go his way? What do you think? How do you think that would look?
Well, I mentioned at the beginning that Hunt, again, I with all due respect, one of the top athletes that we've seen in the combat sports, multiple combat sports, very dangerous guy to anybody in the world. I don't think anybody's ever described him as one of the great legal minds of the 21st century. So, like I said, he feels betrayed and he feels wronged by the way his career went. Maybe one of those reasons is because he looks at his bank account and thinks it should have another zero or two on it because he's not been paid or compensated the way he was. There's a lot of emotion and stuff like that are coming in his talk for, he goes on Instagram or TikTok or, some of those types of entities, and it's like, Dana White, you're a bitch, and, things like that. That's not exactly the normal behavior for litigants. So you sort of question, where is he coming from? Why, if his lawyers are so good and so strong and they have such a great case, why aren't they controlling him a little more so that there are no problems at a later date, including tipping your hand, Like I said, there is the possibility that if the UFC was aware that Lesnar, how does this even get handled? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so sometimes I might sound like I know what I'm talking about. Sometimes I might sound like I have no clue. But on the most extreme end, if Lesnar was positive for steroids and the UFC knew he was positive for steroids and they pushed to let the fight go anyway, could they be accessories to attempted murder? I know that sounds off the wall and crazy, but I don't know that that's not what Mark Hunt was thinking. They put my life in danger for a $30,000 payday or whatever it is he made for the fight. How is there a settlement? Is it a civil suit? Is it a criminal suit? What, all those things are going to factor in. And like I said, sometimes in these types of things, how much money does Hunt have to blow on legal fees in the next few years? How much Dana, and if Endeavor's involved or the Fertittas are involved, that's a limitless amount of money that he's facing up against. You just extend. The one thing is they've given the Mark Hunt less attention, this lawsuit less attention than even the other lawsuit, the big, the Bob Mazy lawsuit. But in Bob Mazy's lawsuit's case, at the end of the day, unless we're about to be surprised in a couple of days in some shocking fashion, they threw money at it and it's over, So how much? So let's say they go, well, we were going to pay $500 million. We wound up paying $334 million. So we actually spent a lot less than we thought. Just give Hunt $50 million so he shuts up. Would $50 million be enough to shut up Mark Hunt? I don't know. Mark sounds pissed at times. Like money is not the object here. Getting Dana White in the bathroom and beating the crap out of him sometimes sounds like what Mark Hunt would most like to do. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, when the lawyers are like, well, 50 million means that we get 15 million, Mark gets 35, we got to talk him into this. And every time we talked about the original lawsuit, I thought $1 billion would be the settlement. We started there and we did the math and numbers and things like that. I thought $1 billion would be the settlement. So they actually paid a lot less than they thought. So they might get out by throwing a couple $1 million at Mark Hunt. And then it does go away. And again, I don't know. I haven't read through exactly what Mark Hunt is claiming. But if he's claiming that the UFC underpaid him and forced this fight through and put him in danger because they needed to make the money, again, they didn't act like a sports entity should, and that is they should have canceled the fight.
What do you think about them not pursuing his legal fees or their legal fees? Because
What do you
apparently
mean?
the UFC has decided not to press hunt for legal fees should he lose this case.
I don't know what maybe they know that they'd never get paid anyway. Maybe their lawyers insisted, hey, we got to get our money up front since you're being, since you're the defendants and stuff, and there may be something there. We just got to get paid, and I don't know exactly what that strategy would be. Maybe they're trying to extend an olive branch to Hunt in some way, shape, or form so they can settle.
Yeah, because Hunt showed this piece of paper on Twitter saying, he had highlighted it saying, look, they're not going after me for legal fees. Why is that?
Yeah. Yeah. Why is that?
If I'm wrong, why aren't they going after me for these legal fees?
Yeah, because that means Hunt still is in a situation where, again, Hunt has always seemed like he has a point on a philosophy end. The UFC wronged him and put him in danger, putting him in against a dangerous guy that they wrote the rules for just for him. And Lesnar fought after that, right? I mean, that's the thing is here's a guy who's positive for steroids. Even Jones has, was Lesnar suspended? No, I don't even. Maybe he was, but they did everything they can for a certain amount of people, and Connor falls into this. That's why this fight at the end with Chandler, just the fact that $20 million is in there, and that's what Dana uses to justify and say the fight's going to happen. Oh yeah, this fight's going to happen. We already sold $20 million at the gate. That's not a reason for the fight to happen. If, say, Conor McGregor punches his wife in the face, or tests positive for steroids or cocaine or something, the fight should be canceled. And if they
Do you
take
have
action,
doubts? Do you still have doubts that it may not happen? I mean, we'll get to this because I want to get to this part as well. Michael Chandler had said something. I sent it to you, and I'll put it in the video later.
Almost feel guilty giving this to you because I know you're probably cutting weight, but which isn't going to help you. But those are Vigilance
let's
League
go.
gummy bears, legal in all 50 states,
All right.
made in the USA. It's just candy, man.
I love it, dude.
Yeah.
No, hey, I am not cutting weight yet. So we're still, we can still enjoy these gummy bears big time. And this next fight hopefully is at 185 or 170. So I might even be able to eat them in training camp.
Right on,
You
man.
know?
There you go.
That
There
is
you
awesome.
go.
Thank you.
And this was, 2 or 3 weeks after Dana had already announced the date and the weight. And he said, I don't know if he mistakenly did this, but he said, I don't know if the fight's at 185 or 170 yet, because he was talking about the gummy bears that Sean Ryan had given him. And that he wasn't even in training camp. The fight's next month. So this was at the end of April. I mean, sure, he could get a good training camp in for a month and a half or whatever, I'm sure. But those kind of statements made it seem like maybe he wasn't even sure of what was going on. Still.
no, I'm sure his president, I'm sure behind the scenes, the moves are being made to make sure that the fight happens. It's been long enough. Like I said, they themselves are telling you they've already sold $20 million in tickets. It would be a major stumble and a black eye if something happened to the fight. But just watch Connor twitching on his Roadhouse interview.
He looks like he's playing promoter more lately. He's talking about, I bought into Bare Knuckle FC. I'm doing this thing over here, this over here.
Yep.
Not a whole lot about the fight, really.
Right, and that's here's so yeah. When they're in the ring, I'll know the fight's happening. Until then, you're gonna have to show me Conor McGregor in the ring, because there's just too much other stuff going on for it to be something that you can just put in the bank. Promoting bare knuckle. So He bought a piece of the Bare Knuckle show. Bare Knuckle's probably done, I think, 3 or 4 shows since that announcement. I think they're in Mohegan Sun this weekend.
I
Or
didn't
last
even know.
weekend or
I didn't
something
even
like
know.
that. Yeah, there's some, other than using Conor McGregor's name to splash their name around a couple of weeks ago when the purchase happened, hasn't amounted to much. But what if he shows up at the Mohegan Sun and, punches a bartender?
I think the fact that they're doing shows in Vegas is a pretty big deal, though, because it's, from everything I've heard, it's pretty difficult to get a license in Vegas because of the UFC.
Here's my perspective of that. The UFC showed everybody the formula. The boxing commissioners are like, oh, no, this sport, it's too rough, too scary, and this and the other stuff. And the UFC went in and they said, look, we got the refs. We know nobody's died yet. We know how to handle the sport. You guys will come along, but here's how you're going to make money. Boxing as a fighter 1 and a fighter 2, and you charge each of them licensing money. You charge their cornermen and their managers licensing money. You charge the promoter licensing money, and you charge the matchmaker licensing money, the referees licensing money. Even Bruce Buffer pays for a license. So now you've got a whole different set of licenses. And if you look at it, it's not boxing / MMA licenses. They're different. And maybe the fees are slightly different or whatever. But all they broke it down to, the boxing commission down to, was this is how you do the paperwork to make it go through. And that's the formula for bare knuckle. That's what they should have done from the very beginning, is said, here's a third set of licensing. We already understand the sport. You do too, because we're a lot more like boxing than what MMA was. You've already put it through. Yeah, it's a little crude, a little rugged, a little bloody, a little not mainstream. But at the end of the day, people want to see it, and you're going to make money as a boxing commission. And that may be the reason why you saw Feldman bending the knee in photos with Dana White in public and stuff like that, was just getting a final okay to make sure that they're doing everything that they have to do to go ahead and get licensed over there and not be blocked or whatever.
Yeah, the fact that Dana let that picture come out, he wouldn't let that picture come out unless there was a valid reason.
Yeah. What message are they sending? Dana, like I said, Dana's got so many things going on and stuff like that. At some point, he's, again, we were talking about it, they got a couple 100,000 downloads of their web application. How much is that company really worth? If McGregor bought a piece of it, Dana could certainly have bought a piece of it or all of it if he wanted. And he's not that interested. It's small for him. He doesn't care. That's the thing, is what gets on Dana's radar nowadays is, who knows what that is. But this was
power slap.
Yeah, and again, we've already talked too much about that and the egos and stuff that go into that. But I think that's really what's most important to Dana is Dana. And I think at some point he just said, I don't give a shit about bare knuckle. He may even have watched a couple of bare knuckle shows and been like, yeah, that was all right. So
yeah, now he's saying, I don't know if you heard this, but I saw he was saying the kind of things they're looking at in the future is like having a power slap event on Friday, UFC on Saturday, WWE on Sunday type deal. So power slap's going to be forced into this
yeah
arrangement.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if they pull that off. It would have been more interesting with bare knuckle, maybe, right? But for fight fans, right? The other part of it is if you've listened to Dana too talk, oh God, I mean, I don't know if it's motocross or BMX but like there's like those extreme sports, skateboarding and crap like that, he also feels like there's an interest in that. And again, what is the interest? I think that the way that they can monetize any of those sports that they're not currently monetized now is actually through gambling. And I think that that's one of the things that people don't look at is that he may also have some money coming in from gambling, which would actually not be legal for him to be, money coming in. He'd have to not be gambling on the UFC or making any profit from doing that. But I wonder if he's not the house for some big foreign players when they go overseas and that sort of stuff. And that would be interesting, right? Because what happened with the UFC is the UFC all of a sudden went from a pariah show to a show that is gambled on a lot. And a lot of people make money off of the gambling. So now what happens when, you add BMX as a sport and motocross as a sport and power slap as a sport, and all of them can be gambled on the websites and stuff like that. Yeah. So we'll see how what he follows up on and what he lets fall through the cracks. I think he's going to be hard to remove from the UFC. I don't even know if it's in the best interest of the UFC to remove him almost no matter what. So we'll see what amounts to that information. Again, on record here with the Brock Lesnar, Mark Hunt situation, I present to you that with the Conor McGregor fight coming up, you're going to be in almost a similar potential situation there where this is one of those guys that makes them the type of money that moves the radar. So will they create a new set of rules and exceptions in order to make this fight happen? You've got that risk going down because Conor's been a little bit of a loose cannon as well. So you wonder, might he test positive for steroids? Might the comment from Chandler about 185 have the innuendo that Conor's people have approached him and said, he might not make weight. Let's figure it out so that the fight happens anyway, and we'll just do it at 185. You don't know. Maybe Chandler was just speaking off the cuff. At the end of the day, Chandler's a 155-pounder and a small one in terms of stockiness and things like that. It doesn't behoove him to fight at 185. But if that's what Conor wants, put it this way, this is not a fight that's going to be banned or blocked from happening because of the weight. So Conor can come in at whatever goddamn weight he wants, and they're still going to force this fight through somehow. That ain't right. Chandler may already be aware of something, and that may be the reason for the comment. Maybe not. But like I said, you're in the same situation still now. The effects of the class action lawsuit are that some fighters got some money, and that's good. I'm glad. Anybody who's cashing a check from the UFC, especially for time put in and stuff like that, more power to them. But you're in the exact same situation here that you were when they moved the show from Vegas to California for John Jones. When push comes to shove, when the big money guys come, they will not let the fight go through or be stopped, even though the commissions are the ones that are at fault. The WADA, USADA, whoever knew Lesnar was positive and said, okay, we won't say anything, or, whatever the circumstances were there, is the ones not doing their job. And we're in the same situation with Conor. It could happen from the steroids to cocaine to some type of other out-ring incident to just the fact that he doesn't make weight by a hideous amount. Those are all good reasons to cancel a fight. But you look at Dana, and Dana says, oh, no, we 20 million. And that's supposed to trump everything. So is the right response to Dana. So we're going to make up new rules? Because you can't make up new rules. That's not sport. So, but they've always gotten away with that to the point where they act brazenly about it. And there's nobody who steps up to stop it. Hunt is making a lot of noise and a lot of complaints and stuff, but like I said, it's a guy a lot like he's facing a wall. He's facing a wall that will shut him down at some point. If they throw money at him, or if they extend the lawsuit for another 10 or 15 years, forcing him to spend resources. If you're in a resource battle with the UFC, good luck.
Yeah, I think that's a kind of a good thing to end it on as far as a kind of like a good point. I wanted you to take some time to talk about what you got going on with the MMA Collector, because I know you've been doing a lot of great interviews and stuff as of late.
Yeah, I got to get back. I got a little bit of sidetracked with some other work on videos and things, and we got to get back. I've got a couple of our MMA Classic fights that are still in the can that we got to publish that I'm very happy with. We're going to obviously continue with that segment. I do the interviews I enjoy doing, and I like to do them. Historic interviews with historic people. I just did one that I wonder how it's going to be received. I wonder how ignorant people can be or whatever. But I just interviewed Brian Johnson, who's one of the early UFC guys. Now, the controversy there is that Brian had a stroke. So if you care anything about history, you should put your headphones on and listen to what the man has to say. It affected his speech to a certain extent, but it didn't affect his mind. And some of the stuff he was saying and some of the stories he was telling were fantastic.
Yeah, he was one of my early guests.
Oh, actually. Great. And so that's the thing is very few people would have him on as a guest. Very few people would say, I'm not listening to that. He told me, he said, I want you to call me on the phone and listen to me talk, and you tell me if you want to have me on for an interview. And I said, no, we don't have to do any of that. I'm going to interview you. You know what I mean? And if people don't want to listen to it, I'm okay. I'm fine with, people not listening to all my interviews or whatever and having a low hit count. But everything he said was extremely valuable. Great stories, fun stuff. The very first interview that we did when we started the interview, the long form interviews, was Paul Varlins, who's since passed away. And Brian Johnson told me a story about Paul Varlins. It was very interesting. He met Paul in a bar, and Paul, being a huge guy, Johnson being an impressive guy, but much smaller, Paul tried to start a fight with him, spilled him beer on him and stuff like that, and wanted to fight him. And eventually Johnson was a very smart guy also, calmed things down, bought him a beer and said, hey, if you want to go at it, show up at the gym tomorrow at 8 a.m. and we'll spar. And Varlins was there at 8 a.m. He couldn't believe it, but Varlins showed up. So, those are the old school guys and the old school stories. And that's just a little taste of the type of stuff that Brian talked to and going through. He also did a bunch of pro wrestling in Japan and things like that, and told some stories in that respect and things that I found fascinating. And I found him very humble and very willing to try to communicate. So I think it would be disrespectful to just dismiss him as an interview. And I did it. I don't know that we'll get a million views or anything like that, but we should. People just put your headphones on and listen to what the man has to say. Concentrate a little bit. Concentrate and say, back it up a little if you didn't understand him and put it forward, because he's there. He's there upstairs. And I asked him, I said, are you a little foggy as well as having a speech impediment? And he said, no. And he proved that to me in the interview. So I'm very proud of having done that and that type of interview. So yeah, we're the MMA Collector. We're still out there. And Ed, the actual MMA Collector, I'm the MMA history guy and the MMA podcast, MMA Museum podcast. But Ed's the guy who manages the collection, and he's got some things in the works that could make some noise, some fun things. He's always out there trying to pick up collections and things like that. So, yeah, we're still out there, moving forward.
And what are you up to with the dog rescue these days?
Oh man, about 20 minutes before your interview, Ashley, the boss here at the Wet Nose Project, put out a post on Facebook that one of the dogs, Whiskey, was found to have 3 tumors in his heart. And Whiskey is, you get to know the dogs and their personalities and things like that, and you get some affection for them. I know people may think I'm silly over it, but I enjoy him. The bottom line is Whiskey's a dog that spent his entire life in a shelter, and he's the dog that Ashley brings to meet other dogs to see how they interact with dogs and things like that, because he's got a very kind, very mellow personality and doesn't fight with dogs or anything like that, and puts up with whatever comes his way. So he's been a hero dog at the shelter for a long time, and now he's going to go through a little bit of a harder time. They're draining fluid from his chest cavity and stuff like that, and that's the kind of thing you deal with every day. At some point, it's kind of a sad profession or hobby. I don't know how, I'm not making money, but I do it every day because I care. Because the tragedies and the sad stories far outweigh the positives and the good stories.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a kind of a labor of love, and that's where we are today. I have been, when I started with them, I was watching 2 big dogs, pit bulls, that have to be kept separately from the rest of the shelter and stuff like that. There was a fellow from Germany living with them for like the last 6 or 8 months. So that responsibility of mine had curtailed, but he left. So I've been going to see them every day, Zafira and Gato, if anybody remembers the name. And they're sweet dogs. So yeah, time marches on. That's all.
Yeah. And as always, we put the stuff in the show notes, the links to the MMA Collector, the links to the Wet Nose Project. Make sure you guys check that out. Check out Miguel's work, because he's been doing a lot of interviews. He's been jamming out a lot, and as always, I appreciate your insights into these topics. I think you did a great job.
Without really revealing a name here, you had sent me an interview that we had lined up there that I wasn't able to follow up on because of just being busy, but I am going to follow up with you on it, and we're going to nail that one down. And if you want to join me, we'll do it together.
Which one was that?
It's a guy from Hawaii.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, yeah. So yeah. If you want to join me, if not, I'll do it alone. But it would be cool. So yeah. I'm going to ask you to help me set that one up again, just because I didn't follow up the first time.
Okay.
All right. Cool.
All right, everybody. As always, we appreciate your support. Subscribe, like the show, put comments in. We'll answer them. And as always, until the next time, we appreciate support, and take care.
Live to Fight is the type of company that Dana killed. It's a homegrown. It's a guy that just does good work and puts it out there. And if you can support him, you really should, because he's precisely a guy who can't. His banners may not be able to hang on the UFC because he hasn't been able to pay them $100,000 to get his stuff out there. That's the corporate stuff that we're talking about now with the UFC. That they've made everything at that level where it's all about money for them. And Live to Fight is a dude that does good work, makes you a great banner, and doesn't have $100,000 to get on the UFC and stuff, and deserves support. So any fighter out there, anybody out there, owner of a gym or anything like that listens to us, God bless you, and thank you very much for your support. And extend that to Live to Fight, because he's one of us. Those guys are one of us.